Probably
How do you clear the image now? That's really stupid.
Alright, so it looks like this works.
No, it didn't.
Okay, cool. So I guess we should discuss what we wanted to discuss. It's very important. We know we have 0 viewers, so that's cool. So we don't need to introduce any
but
of
it is
this.
being recorded.
Yeah.
We should probably introduce ourselves so that.
No, it's our name is right under the thing.
Mine's not.
Put your name under so you don't.
I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of the picture that I attached as my logo, but it won't let you not have a picture.
I'll keep that then. So anyways, so the point of this, right, is to keep this like an hour every week, discuss like all the stuff that we're currently doing on the Ehcache 3.0 efforts. I've created this dev.meeting page on the wiki on GitHub. That's what I'm looking at when I look like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've put this I'll try to put all the agenda on every time, prior to the meeting starting. Then the good news is we don't need any scribe because all this is recorded. That's what I wanted, so that we can look it up later and basically summarize all this, and we can just focus on the fighting we want to have. So again, all happening in the open, so people can watch this later if they want to or dare to. And what else? And yeah, I added this QA thing in case anybody ever has questions. I know that we had a couple of people participating on the mailing list or other things. Other mediums. So anyways, here would be a place every week. Let's see how that works. Okay, anybody looked at the agenda I sent? The stuff that I want to see discussed?
Yes, I did.
Because it's a problem to me, obviously, right now. So again, for a quick intro and trying to avoid overloading terms, we're talking about Ehcache here. So Ehcache, for once, will have a proper interface that's called cache, most probably, I guess. We already have an issue with that in JSON 107 because it means we got name collisions.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can live with these. Maybe we shouldn't. I think we shouldn't.
If we consider the set of functionality exposed by the 107 cache to be the base functionality of a cache, then assuming we need an interface that extends it, it should have a name that represents the aspects in which it.
Right, but we backtracked from that. It doesn't extend it anymore.
Oh, of course. Well, then does it matter?
That's what I was thinking. Maybe
because no one's going to mix them. Well, not nobody, but it's less likely that they will mix them.
Right. So that's an open question. I don't think it's a very a solution hopefully will surface as we move forward with this. I would just hate basically this interface to be called Ehcache yet again. Though maybe it just has to be.
It wouldn't bother me calling it Ehcache.
No.
It would bother me calling it Ehcache if the implementation was called cache.
Right, but that certainly wouldn't be the
case. If the implementation was called Ehcache import even, I would be happier, or happier than I am currently about the weirdo naming that's going on there.
So anyways, that's the interface I talk about. And so every cache is, as of today, backed up by a store instance. Stores are now being org Ehcache spi.cache.store. I'm not really sure what cache's in there, but that's how it is right now anyways. And so one first important thing is that we now have cache, and we obviously don't want to expose the element outside of, well, we want to get rid of element. Now, how much is it that we want to get rid of element? Do we want to get rid of element only at the cache level? Well, I think we want to do that. But so what is it at the store level, right? Because we know we need something to be able to store metadata about something. So do we want to reuse the element class for that? Do we want to come up with something else? And more importantly, the thing I care about is the point 2 there, which says Do we want to have a store of k to element of v's, or do we want to have a store of element kv's?
What is in... So assuming that this new element is not the same as old elements, even though they have the same name at the moment, what is the distinction? Well, what is being stored? What is the purpose of the new element? What is being stored in it?
Right. That's basically what the question is all about. So there is metadata that we need to store. Do we only care about storing the value along with the metadata in there, or do we care about storing the key itself? Again, for those of you who know the 107 spec, there is this whole mess with the cache entry, right? If we want element to be our cache entry, it will need to have the key in there. But basically, long story short, the question is, do we want to have the key in there? I guess.
I see cache entry as being a synthetic thing like map.entry. In fact, at one point I think it was map.entry, so it's right. Completely synthetic. There is no reason for element to be an entry. I'm not bothered about whether the key is in there, to be honest. Unless I don't see this. This isn't. I mean, it's. I haven't. Okay, so the more interesting question. Okay, no, I'm going to. I think the more interesting question about element is whether the set of metadata is closed or not. Because that has a much more fundamental.
But if we do not make it public anyway, it's an implementation detail, no?
Well, element, yes.
No, but the fact that we have a closed or an open set of metadata.
Depends how open it is. If it's open such that there are plug-in points where the user can, like, if the user, for example, is doing things like running their own eviction algorithm or running their own expiry algorithm, and they need to store additional metadata that is immutable independently of the value that's being cached.
All right. That works neatly for, for instance, making it so that you can implement the clock vector that we talked about.
Yeah, implement whatever you want. Well, that's the other thing is, not only is it closed, is there any fixed set of metadata, or is everything optional? Potentially, is there no metadata? If you choose not to have any expiry or eviction, not any, if you choose to an eviction and or expiry settings that do not require metadata to be stored, do we need to store anything? Like if you just if you just have no expiry and you evict at random, or evict based on the value only, is there any need to have metadata, and should the whole thing then become optional? I would lean towards the store being a KV thing and exposing methods to manipulate metadata attached to the keys.
There are things that need to happen atomically, right? You need to be able to mutate stuff. You need to be able to mutate the store along with. So, one example would be the defaulted flag that needs to be maintained on certain puts, right? And that needs to happen atomically.
Right, but that's a different kind of metadata.
Maybe.
Maintaining
last access is something that needs to be maintained atomically. Right. On a get.
That's true.
It's a mutative operation on a get, right?
I mean, I guess maybe there's a distinction between the store storing elements and the store exposing an element construct such that you can perform atomic mutations. Well, not atomic mutations, but to represent the identity of a key value metadata bound tuple. But maybe I'm splitting hairs too much at this point. I probably am.
Well, it's a weird balance, right? You want to keep it open enough so that it's powerful enough, but you don't want to open it too much because this thing needs to.
Yeah, I think the first thing to figure out is exactly how much that thing is opened up. If it's just storing a completely, whether it's just storing a completely closed set of metadata or not. I really, whatever how we do, I don't want to call it element.
All
It
right.
has to be renamed. So
All
number
right.
one, it has to be renamed. I don't want to, unless the name is so intrinsic to caching as an idea that to rename it would confuse the users, i.e., cache. Other than that, I'd be all for renaming everything we can get away with just to try and produce a sort of a logical break with Ehcache 2x. So, for example, I don't want to keep the store interface. I think it's confusing because it would be confused with the Ehcache 2x's store, and it will be confused with
Cache backend.
any other million things that store things. A cache backing, call it the. I don't know. But then that goes into your next thing, which is what is the role of store, and maybe if we
Right.
figure that out, you come up with a better name for it.
Right. So right now, that's cool. So let's say we rename element to something. We'll figure that out. We'll probably rename store, and I think I'd be tempted to go for k comma element v, but I'm pretty sure I'll regret that. And on the amount of metadata, I would keep it close set entirely.
Yeah, unless we're forced. Definitely.
Right. And for now, right, and move forward like that and see where we get what. Right. So on the roles.
By the way, I much see on two. By the way, I prefer K element V because I see the value and the metadata being lifecycled together, but the key, arguably, you can conceive of having it as having a longer lifecycle. When you do things like replaces and stuff, I think of the fact that you've changed what that key is mapped to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, but potentially,
which includes the metadata.
Potentially, whether or not the identity of the key that you map to changes or not is an implementation detail, but the element, the value and the metadata are bound together. When we, well, yes. Arguably, the metadata is bound to the life cycling of the entry, but the entry's life cycle is constrained by the fact that the values life cycle, and the key is longer lived. Anyway, sorry, that's kind of academic.
I agree. Makes sense to me at least.
Yep.
All right. So in order to get back on the naming, now might be the time then to clearly define those roles. By the way, this is me glancing at the current 2x line.
But these roles are based on what?
No, like the items. So I don't think this is Roman notation, but whatever. Those.
Roman numerals.
Right. So those.
Yes.
I'm not sure the list is complete, is what I meant to say. So that's what I looked at, the one I thought of. I think a bunch of things become cleaner, hopefully. And it's not even necessarily split as I see it. So let me start with 1.1, right? The cache roles. It says store by value, store by reference. I don't think this should be the cache role at all. I think this is the store's role, especially
you mean
if
there's a detachment procedure that has to go on, the store should be doing it?
Right. Certainly, certain stores will only be able to operate in a certain mode.
Yes.
Right. So what we have around that is a copy strategy as well. I think all that belongs in the store. And I think we folded that in the 2x line as well to behave like that.
Yeah, things leak in and out of places. And I'm sure there's specific code, but yes.
Right, so I think store should go there. Maybe I should edit this document as we speak or not. I don't know. Let me try to edit this. I can do that on the... I can't do this here because I'm not logged in. Crap. All right, so edit this page. All right, so this goes to the store. Okay. Expiry. So basically, if I do a get on a certain key and the thing is expired, if I do that on the store, should that return me the entry if it's present, or should it inline expire?
To me, because at its most fundamental, expiry is a data freshness thing and not a capacity control thing. Obviously, it can be done in the store, but it's a responsibility that it does not need to belong to the store and does not necessarily naturally belong to the store. To me, it's something that can be done by the cache. Now, there's a second issue of if you want to, if the store wants to do optimization stuff where it kicks stuff out that is expired, that's fine, but that's not a functional. It's not something that you have to do.
Right. The thing that annoys me are the concerns around this. So there is this optimization you just talked about, then there is this other special case that we have today in Ehcache, which is around listeners, i.e. eviction. As of today, so capacity eviction. So I guess there we all agreed this is being handled in the store, right? So if you put something in the store, it will not refuse. It will just accept it. If it implies kicking something out, it will just do that.
Yep.
At that point, when we decide the victim, we check if the victim is expired. If the victim is expired, we'll actually fire an expiry.
Right.
All right. So
the 107 spec isn't specific about whether, well, the 107 spec doesn't say what is supposed to happen in that context, I believe.
Most probably not, because I guess it doesn't talk about eviction
at all. Mm-hmm.
So,
the question, and there was always debate about that if the store evicts something that's expired, we have historically always tried to fire the expiry listener. But there's even language in the spec now, I think, that drifts towards not doing that because, sorry, for some annoyingly enough, I don't have the 107 spec open. Let me grab it. Hang on. So when it talks about the listeners there, the language is cache entry expired listener. Called after one or more entries have been expired by the cache. This is not necessarily when an entry is expired, but when the cache detects the expiry. But it doesn't also say that it means that it was removed from the cache.
Right, because there are
and we know there are scenarios where things have to be expired, but they cannot be removed. Particularly when you're doing inline expiry under read lock. You can't remove it.
Right.
Well, you could drop the read lock, attempt to take a write lock, and then re-get, and if it's still there, then do it. But that would seem to be something that's sacrificing performance on the altar of bizarre listener.
So when is it that in 107 the listener is to be fired? When we detect that it expired, so that it can.
After one or more entries have been expired by the cache. But it doesn't describe what expired means. I wonder if I have a copy of the PDF.
Because, yeah, that's annoying. So I personally hate this thing that we've been doing to try to, it's expired, so let's not fire an eviction, but let's fire an expiry. Because it's an element, whether it's expired, is exposed through the element. So somebody listening for eviction could actually see something as expired, even though he just got notified of an eviction. Because it's just is a race.
It's inherently racy. Yep.
So that's one. And two, since you know that it expired, and I'm not even sure how important that is, but let's say, you know it is expired, it could still be the result of an eviction. I.e., if you would like to monitor your through. I'm not sure why you would want to do this. This is pretty twisted, but anyways. Like, use the listener to try to figure out when your store is under pressure this thing would be useless, right? You don't know because you could be under pressure, eviction pressure, right? I.e. the latency is paid on eviction on puts, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means. While expiry means that theoretically that the pressure, if any, is experienced on gets. So anyways, you lose information is what I'm trying to say. And whether that information is relevant or not, I don't know. But then if it isn't, why is it not so that we just simply fire removals for all that?
Well, it's not clear that. Well, of course, in 107, it's not clear what you're supposed to do. Whether you are, you may the spec.
Yeah, I probably need to recheck the TCK. When I implemented the 2x 107 wrapper, I had to deal with that, but I don't remember. Because what is it you do, basically, on being notified about eviction or expiries that you do differently than from removals? Especially if in the removal you can, again, know same
What
thing.
if you go to remove something that's expired?
Right. And anyways, the reason I ask all this is because I, again, feel that we'll have to deal with notifications both in the store and both in the cache, right? And potentially all kind of notifications. So how will we do that again? Do we wire it so that the store notifies only about, say, evictions, doesn't deal with expiries? So as far as it's concerned, it capacity evicts something, where you can then register a listener in the caching layer that then does the translation. And if it wants to do this check, oh, all right, so this is being capacity evicted, but it's being capacity evicted and it happens to be expired, so I'll fire an expiry notification, or I fire an event, a eviction event, or I fire a removal event, whatever, right? But basically that conceptually, the cache registers only an eviction listener with the store, because that's the only thing that the store will do. I.e., these are not the same listeners, obviously.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think I like the approach because we can then translate however we want, right? If you need a 107 mode that behaves this way, or even somebody wants to, like, doesn't care about all that, wants to get everything notified as removals, this layer can basically do this translation easily. Arguably, it can always be done, but at least it doesn't leak all over the place. Is what I'm saying.
I'm trying to read the 107 spec at the same time. It doesn't seem to very well define what expired means. One of the concerning things is that it defines that the listener should be fired once and only once.
For expiry?
For the transition, it blanket. Which then gets you the question: well, what happens if you do if two different threads call get? Are we only supposed to see? Is only the first one to see it expired supposed to call the expired?
Well, more metadata then. Need to flip a bit in the new element class or whatever it's become.
And they also get interesting questions then, because there's also a two-stage check you have to do in the other thread, because it would be therefore considered illegal for one thread to see it as expired and then subsequently for a second thread to see it as not expired.
I don't know, just make it an atomic Ehcache, right?
Yeah, you'd have to, but there's two things you have to check then. The first thing you have to check is, has somebody else claimed this is expired already? And then the second thing you have to check is it actually expired now? Because the way expiry policy is written, it's possible for custom expiry policy to not consider the transition to be a one-time thing. Discounting the fact that also, if you're relying on things like system current time millis or system nanoseconds, that two different threads might see the thing as one side of the threshold or the other at the same time. So anyway, so even absent any listeners to fire, you probably still have to mark the thing as expired. Of course, it's something we don't even think about in Ehcache. Remember, it's probably not something you have to worry about in reality. But.
Right. So basically, right. So you end up as checking the policy. Is this thing expired? If this thing returns yes, your cast falls true, right?
Yep.
If
and then anyone else later on will see it's expired.
Right. It's expired. From there on, the thing's expired.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And you fire. If you succeeded doing the cast, you fire.
So then you can also make the argument that the expired listener is independent of the removed listener. Expired happens at the point when the thing disappears from view, and removed happens at the point at which the thing actually ceases taking up resources.
Right, but do we care about that state transition? Is it not good enough to say it expired? It can't be observed in the cache anymore.
Yeah, and also the other thing is, well, can something be removed that is expired? No, probably not.
Well, probably. There is stuff around that at least in the TCK. If you do a remove on something that's expired,
that it does what? That it
does
acts like there was nothing there.
That it does something. I don't remember.
I just found a statement to the
Well, let's settle it for now that we do it this way, right? That we just have eviction listeners at the store level, to which the cache registers one, and then handles these how it sees fit. Expiry is being handled by the cache layer, not by the store. So again, same thing. I almost wanted to say if you want to have a expiry notification policy or whatnot, we could.
So
but in terms of, so I'm arguing for having expiry as part of the cache, and having listeners as part of the cache. Having no listeners in the store, eviction has an eviction listeners. Right, so I end up with expiry at the cache level, listeners at the cache level, so these are the ones we discussed. And at the store, I have the store by value versus reference, and eviction listeners there. And when I say eviction listeners, I'm talking like private ones. Right? Not the public ones that the user.
Right. The language, I found the language I was looking for.
Okay.
Each entry, so under Section 2, Fundamentals 2.1 core concepts, each entry stored by a cache has a defined duration, called the expiry duration, during which they may be accessed, updated, and removed. Once this duration has passed, the entry is said to be expired, capital E. Once expired, lowercase e, entries are no longer available to be accessed, updated, or removed, just as if they never existed in a cache. So basically, if you are firing the expiry listener, the first time you veto the thing's existence, i.e. a get returns null even though the thing is still in the store, to me it seems that is the point at which you have expired it. At that point, you have to then consider that that's a one-time transition. You flip the boolean, it is now expired. Any further interaction with that thing is not supposed to fire anything. It's fine, the evictor can remove it, but as far as anything that's said here, as far as the external user is concerned, it does not exist. They're no longer available to be accessed, updated, or removed, just as if they never existed. Now, to me, that means you are free for eviction messages to just always fire whatever listener you want to use, removed, evicted, or whatever. There's no need to call expiry because there's no way for the user to tell. If you fire evicted and they say, oh, this thing's expired, you say, oh, well, it wasn't when I looked at it. Sorry. And if you choose to see that it's already expired, if the thing is already marked as expired at that point, So basically, if it's expired but not detected, you can just call it. You can just fire the evicted. That's fine. No one can prove otherwise. If it's marked as expired, you are not supposed to fire anything because the evictor is supposed to act like it never existed. And the other thing is, if you CAS it, you can also on-queue it onto some processing queue for being removed at a later date or something, and the evictor can start with processing that queue. You're muted, Alex.
I was thinking of something around those lines too. I don't want to really, good idea. What we'll see. Right? Yeah. Because my plan is still to try to get like some in-memory, like on-heap thing working ASAP.
Yeah.
Certainly of some lower bits, and then because there is more stuff around the config that's a little bit more time consuming. But basically, make sure that we have something that actually makes sense. And then I think we can also pretty quickly, I think we should be able to run it against the 107 TCK. Not the whole thing, but for instance, if we want to validate that what we're thinking around listeners, we can then validate that.
Well, I think it's a good thing to get that put through TCK quickly as well, because if we find if we find either things in the TCK that are buggy or things that seem confusing and very counterintuitive, we need to get.
Yeah. Which, by the way, might require a new task for somebody to handle, which is wire the TCK in the whole Gradle build system. I will create a task.
In particular there.
No, I'm not. We only happen to have Louis and Hung on the call. But I'm looking at James. All right, so cool. All right, other stuff in the cache then is the cache life cycle, listener and whatnot. Obviously, this is all a matter of a cache. I guess we won't argue that too long, right?
Sorry. Reading my Twitter stream. This meeting's interesting, I promise. Cache life cycle.
Right. That to me is obviously the store couldn't care less about that.
Yeah, there may be a life cycle for the store, but that's its internal concern.
So Bootstrap cache loader, which we did say I think we would wire through the cache life cycle itself.
We said this would be an external thing.
Yes.
Didn't we?
That would wire itself through the life cycle. So I think, as I said, right, I looked.
It's not a cache role, it's not a store role, it's a
nobody's role.
It's its own role, it's a completely independent thing.
Yeah. On cache loaders and cache writers, I think these are definitely cache things. The good news is that we have this.
They are cache things, but.
Yeah, but so I need again to relook into the 107 stuff because I gotchas around that.
There's stuff.
But it's definitely feasible with the entry processor.
Yeah.
To implement this.
The only question you have to check is that you're allowed to call the cache loader twice. Or multiple times.
Why?
The entry processor. Well, I guess it doesn't matter, does it? No, you're probably fine. Well, depends on how the entry processor is implemented.
Again, right, but so I guess
the entry processor is supposed to be atomic.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess cache loaders, you're safe with cache loader because you're only supposed to load if it's empty. So if you see it and it's not empty, you just skip it. If you see it and it's empty, you call the loader and you try and do a put if absent. If it fails, oh well, it's no longer empty.
No, you can do that with a process, an entry processor. You get the whole thing. The thing is not there, right? You could decide to do a bunch of things at that point, right? Lock the entry or God knows what.
Okay.
Because you're sort of implying now that we would try to load and then do the put if absent, which could in turn fail because another thread loaded it in the meantime.
But if that's the case, you don't need to recall the loader. Because something else has loaded it, and so the...
Right, but what we're trying to say is that it got loaded by two threads concurrently.
That's fine.
I think so too. So I don't think anything's the problem there.
Loaders, writers, listeners, some of them. Expiry one.
No, listeners, sorry, yeah. Listeners, I said all of them. The public ones, I'm going to call public listeners. public entry listeners, I think, or whatever. I think they're all dealt with at the cache level. The one I wanted to have in the store is the the eviction one, but that bubbles up, and the cache listens to the eviction to fire its eviction. It's not the same. Does that make sense? That's the way that I would do it.
Okay.
All right. All right. I guess stats. I'm not really sure what I meant when I wrote stats down, because I guess with the stats framework, the answer is yes.
Stats is the ultimate leaking thing.
Right. So it all
You're
depends.
implicitly trying to observe details of the internals.
Right. So stats is both cache and store,
The
and possibly caching tier in there and whatnot.
I would make the argument that the exposing of the stats is obviously a cache role.
Right. Yeah.
But monitoring of the stats is a role that spreads spider's web-like through everything.
Right. So maybe I should just remove this entirely. I just wrote that, so I'm removing it entirely. And right, so then apparently we're back to store, and then we got expiry, but we did say we don't want to keep expiry there. So let me save this.
You could even implement the store as an expiry listener, and it could listen to expired things and evict them.
I think if you guys refresh the meetup notes, you'll end up with the updated list. So do we think we forgot anything?
Well, there's a whole bunch of roles for the cache that aren't. Well, are there?
I don't know.
There's a bunch of store roles that aren't on there.
Like storing?
Like storing.
Right. Yeah, some very obvious stuff I didn't put on the list.
No, that's fine. Well, you've really just taken the things that are currently or partly the cache's role and made them figure out what they still are. No, that makes sense.
I'm probably forgetting something, but... Alright, so that's cool. So is that it for that?
Yep.
Cool. All of the things to implement. Cool. So there were a couple of action items, like trying to wire the TCK into the 107 module within the Gradle build.
Get an issue for
so I'll create an issue for that. Let me do this right now. Issue, new issue, wire 107 TCK and build somehow, because I'm not sure how we best do that. This needs to be labeled JSO 107. Right, so much on that, I guess. There is one other thing that came up. Is there only one thing? Yeah, well, I guess. Well, yeah. All right. So there is one thing that came up that's possibly slightly related to the Ehcache 3 stuff, and that's the size of engine. So at some point we'll wire that in, right? That makes sense. So let me try to not get his name.
Whose name?
Craig Andrews.
What does Craig Andrews want?
He would like to see the stuff that I have on my repo, the Ehcache size of engine, Hibernate 3, Hibernate 4, and Groovy be published to Maven Central. So these aren't real TC projects per se. This is just stuff I've done.
Well, they are in the TC and the source code to it.
Are they? Cool.
Well, if you did it, yes.
Okay. I don't know. Whatever I did.
Well, I suspect under your employment contract, Silicon or Software AG now own that source code. Especially as it was originally hosted in Ehcache and you pulled it out. But yeah.
No, not the size of engine, right? The modules to Groovy and Hibernate.
Oh, those.
Right. So, the Hibernate one is pretty straightforward. I don't think it should be published anywhere. I think what we need to do is merge it inside the Ehcache H2LC module within Hibernate.
Yep.
And we should start doing that as for the Hibernate 5 efforts.
Yep.
So that's not a big deal. That's
the Groovy one.
But what do we do with the Groovy one? So on the Groovy one, I pinged them 2 days ago.
Who? The Groovy people?
No, Greg Andrews, saying, "Hey, would you like to take ownership of this?" Because, well, there are a couple of reasons. We could try to pull this under the TC umbrella if it makes sense. But, I did this just mainly as a proof of concept based on stuff I read upon. But I'm not a Groovy user, so
yeah,
I'm totally the wrong person to maintain this. So I guess what I'm asking is anybody in Groovy internally
interested in
and willing to maintain that?
Yeah, the maintenance would be pretty minimal and substantially tied to the way that Groovy changes and not the way that any of our stuff changes. Assuming we don't screw about with the.
Right. Yeah. That's the point. But see, yeah, it's
much more of a natural fit for a Groovy dev than it is for.
Exactly.
Well,
so I said that I could try to pull this under the TC umbrella, but I need to find somebody up for doing this. So I know I'm not that person. Don't fight for this, Bone.
So he didn't. He created this on March 9th, and you commented 2 days ago. Okay. Well, hang on. So you did actually.
No, well, there was another stuff on the Hibernate thing. So things. He re-pinged me about that. So if this could be published to Maven Central, when he did that, we actually made it. I created the Jira to publish it to Maven Central. I think. Well, the Jira, the issue. But what we did is with Louis' help, maybe, or maybe not. I don't remember. Did we publish this somewhere? No, we didn't. You have to build it.
The Groovy specific stuff.
Certainly the Groovy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I know we published the core engine, but I think we did.
Right. So that's. Oh yeah. The core engine's published, and this is why he came back on the other. So he opened this ticket on all projects, right? And I think on another one we had a discussion. I think but first we need to publish the underlying thing, which happened in the meantime, and so on. The other thing is all right. So since that happened, can we publish this? And a couple of days after, I hope, he commented that on some of it. I replied that more specifically about the Groovy one.
How much, if any, source code is in this?
Oh, very, very little.
Oh, jeez, yeah, it's nothing. And it probably needs more.
Well, that's my take.
I remember us finding this bug where it ends up running through the whole because every Groovy object has some implicit reference back to them.
The way that we found this wasn't to fix Groovy's use of caching or with
There was some Groovy application using Hibernate or something.
Yeah, Gorm or whatever. Groovy's declarational mapper.
Okay.
Something that
uses Hibernate.
It ended up putting a Groovy object inside of a Hibernate 2nd level cache.
Yep.
And every Groovy object has an explicit reference back through its meta class to the Groovy runtime, the entire thing. And so the size of it just starts walking the whole graph.
So that's being taken care of. But I think anybody right, this is aimed at solving.
Yeah, and there are probably, like I said,
with Groovy entirely. Yeah. I'm pretty sure the list is long, but see, this is what I'm saying. I'm the wrong person for this.
Yeah, it needs somebody who, and there are bound to be more places this is falling out, and if somebody, if there are class renamed and stuff, it'll break there too. But I don't know how big the intersection is between people that use the Ehcache with Arc and people who use Groovy.
Right, the key bit is Ehcache with Arc. But this is why I said this is somewhat tied to this, because if we want to, if Arc is ever to play a more significant role in the 3.0 line, we probably want to make sure that this happens.
Does he want it in Maven because he's writing something that depends on it, or does he want it in Maven because it's just easier for him to pull?
I didn't ask. I pinged him again, as you said, 2 days ago.
Lifting the source code and building it locally.
I don't know. I pinged him 2 days ago. It's August. He might be on vacation or God knows what. Maybe I'll just say, sure, I'll do it, and it's not a problem. I just said I'll ask within.
Yeah. Okay.
Internally, if somebody. So now the request's out there. I wasn't expecting somebody saying,
I'll do it.
Anyone
in TC a Groovy person? Currently. I don't.
Anthony, maybe? Not even sure why I'm saying that. Just to say a name.
Anthony does Android dev in his spare time.
With Hung? No?
Hung, do you do Groovy?
No, I don't.
Jason used to.
Was he really? I really wondered.
I think he did Ruby dev, but he did Groovy stuff as well, I seem to remember.
Okay, well.
Anyway, not relevant now. Not helpful. I think, or you can. I mean, did you say you put it out on any of the Groovy, like IRC or Magnus or anything?
That's the next thing I can do and see.
I mean, it'd be ideal if this Craig Andrews guy could do that, but.
Right, he has interest in it, right? So obviously, I guess he's a user of both of them. So we'll see. I'll wait for an answer. Again,
okay.
It's just if he wants to have it, be my guest. Cool. Then I guess that's it. So it's good. So that's recording. We'll see what this looks like. So now we have automatic archival of everything we say.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, it's a scary thought, right? We won't be able to come back and say, I never said that. Somebody will be able to look up and actually say.
We'll all just end up sitting here in silence.
Right.
Prepared to say anything on record.
I guess we still get the right to change our minds.
Yeah.
I still have a question. Why we want to change the name store?
The reason I want to change it is because, well, if there is no other suitable name, we can stick with it. But I would like to change it because I want to change as many names. When somebody starts, so for example, when Alex starts talking about store, it's really confusing because I don't know if he's talking at first glance. I don't know if he's talking about store as in the interface that exists in 2x and all of what that implies, or store as in exists or as it will exist in the Ehcache 3. I'd like to try and break. I don't want if there are alternate names we can pick which are just as good or even not terribly worse. I'd rather move to them to give me a clear mental break from the terminology I used in 2x.
I see.
It's not vitally important. I just think it makes discussion much simpler.
Arguably, everything that's API facing, though, we don't want to apply that, right?
No. I mean, the store in particular, I don't mind if it's a little bit of a worse choice because it's not public facing API, so it's only the developers that have to deal with an awkward name. Yeah, obviously, like I said, cache is not up for debate, and there is a bunch of stuff in almost all of the public API. We should just be picking the best names regardless.
So are we making cache is an interface and
cache is
an implementation?
Cache will now be an interface. What the implementation class is called is another matter. But yes, we're going to fix that because that's just wrong.
And again,
right.
The one open question still remains whether we keep it cache, right? Because javax.cache.cache will then obviously collide with org.ehcache.cache.
So we have to figure out how much of a problem that will be, and.
But having
what the alternate name would be.
Right.
Well, the obvious alternate name, unfortunately, is actually Ehcache.
Right.
And as I said earlier, that's fine as long as we don't call the implementation cache, but we wouldn't do that. So the thing that's wrong in the current code is that the interface has the implementation specific name and the implementation has the abstract name. They're tiered the wrong way around.
Australian is upside down.
Obviously. Right.
All right, cool.
Are we done, illustrious leader?
We're done. And all right.
Thanks for setting it up.
Yes. This time next week.
This time next week, yes, I'll be moving forward. I'm pretty sure I will have things around the. So yeah, I still need to clean up the store stuff, but I wanted to have this discussion to finalize that. So once I have that done, issue 5 is basically done. I'll move on to the cache builder and cache manager builder stuff, and the config things, i.e. the config framework, right? So the whole thing of parsing and whatnot. I did some of cleanup around that already. It's really, like, everything was a little bit of a messy place, so, but it's being cleaned up, and so pretty quickly we'll be able to get as many people, well, a bunch of people ramped up on it and be able to get stuff done. Yeah, I'm not sure I said that, but I would like to have, like, within the next 6 weeks, a heap-only implementation actually working. I.e. buildable, and that stores stuff, right? Not necessarily support every twist and whistles of the 107 implement spec and whatnot, but, stuff that, where you see a whole thing head to tail, and not only, bits and pieces there that are right now pretty abstract. Because except for Chris and I, who spend way too much time on this, but conceptually. All right, cool. Well, thanks.
Okay, cool. Thank you. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.